In the past few years, much has been done in regards to accessibility in gaming. Whether it's Sony baking a ton of great accessibility features into their games that enable even blind gamers to thrive, or it's Microsoft delivering hardware that allows those with limited fine motor control to control their games their way. It's a great time to be a gamer. However, it's during an experiment that I'm running that I noticed a few bad actors in terms of accessibility. But before I get into that, a little context. I am currently doing an experiment where all games that support a controller on PC, I will use a controller only for a whole month. Even in games where I prefer a mouse and keyboard like Overwatch, Baldur's Gate 3, or Project Zomboid. That's not the point of this video though, that's maybe for the future. The reason I bring it up is, in the midst of this, I noticed a few games that don't have controller support. Normally this isn't a big deal, maybe the developers are small, maybe the game doesn't translate well to controller. However, a few big games by a few big devs that don't have controller support, they have console versions. To me, this is pretty unacceptable. It's crazy to me that these games have fully functional controller integration, but arbitrarily leave them out on PC. I understand that users can use Steam input to force a controller to work, but you still won't get proper input icons in a game, and setting it up still may be a barrier to entry for some. So with that preamble all out of the way, time to flame some games that arbitrarily don't support controllers. So, as many of you have probably noticed at this point, the game that's been playing for the past few seconds in the background, and the first one I'm covering, is Civilization 6. Now, many of you may scoff at the notion of playing a 4X game with a controller. To those of you thinking that, indulge me in another story. A few months ago, maintenance needed to do something in my apartment. I didn't want to be there while they were, so I packed up my Xbox and chilled at my parents' place. All the while I was there, I played Civ 6 on my Xbox. I only intended being there a couple hours, but ended up staying 6 hours just because that game is so damn addictive. My point in all that is to illustrate that in 6 hours of playing, my experience was not diminished just because I was using a controller. It wasn't cut down either, like Civilization Revolution back in the day was. It's the full game. So imagine my surprise when I go to play Civ 6 on my PC and use a controller for the experiment. I couldn't believe that I couldn't use a controller on PC. The game allows you to play with people on console using a controller. It supports crossplay, but if you're playing on PC, you just can't. Well, why not just play it on a console if you want to play on controller? Well, there are a few problems with that too. One, it's just not feasible for everyone to go out and buy an Xbox or a PlayStation just for one game. A whole console may not be in someone's means, but a controller is anywhere from $30 to $60 and will work with their home computer or school laptop. It's a lower barrier to entry. Second, I said my experience wasn't diminished by the controller, but it was diminished by being on console. I may be coming off as a bit spoiled, but even on my Series X, the turn time felt kind of brutal. I can't imagine how someone who plays the Switch version of Civ 6 fares. So if someone wants to enjoy better turn speed on PC, but they are restricted to a controller, they just can't. Well, at least not if they don't want to resort to using some translation software. There is a working controller interface, it just needs to be ported. I understand that takes resources, but the hard part's done, and 2K should definitely have enough resources to do it. Alright, that's enough roasting of Civ. Let's see what's next. Alright, Xcom 2. 2K, Firaxis, what the hell are we doing here, guys? I first played Xcom 2 on a controller on my Xbox One. I think it plays pretty damn fine on a controller, too. Okay, maybe the controller support wouldn't be there at launch, but considering the big War of the Chosen expansion got added to the game after the console version of the game released, controller support should have been added in an update with the expansion. This is doubly embarrassing as a turn-based tactics indie game called Massive Chalice that came out a year before XCOM 2 has full controller support. Also, quick aside, Massive Chalice rocks. It gets a little long in the tooth towards the end, but definitely worth playing. Anyways, it's just crazy how a small release like Massive Chalice seems to have no issue taking the time to enable controller support when a big studio who's already done the configuration just refuses to implement it for the PC player base. Okay, so I'll admit this last one's a little different. An iteration of it was on console, but it was pretty much abandoned, and no modern consoles have it available to play. However, I am still taking aim at Valve with CounterStrike. I guess CounterStrike 2 now, if we're being particular. This is baffling to me, as many of Valve's other first-person games support controllers. CSGO had a console port, and Valve themselves make a handheld gaming computer with input akin to a controller in the Steam Deck. It's time to add controller support to CS2. It doesn't need to be the best way to play. It doesn't even need to be competitively viable to play. But controller play should be available natively. That way more people can play, including people playing on Valve's own Steam Deck. Ideally, I'd like to see controller support for Deadlock, but that gets a pass for now as the game is still in development. I know Valve cares about controller players with things like Steam input, but direct support integrated in their games would go a long way. Now, luckily, those are the most egregious examples. Most AAA games support controllers on PCs these days, and quite a few indie devs do too. But I think that makes it even more important to press the few holdouts arbitrarily withholding controller support to the flames. Thousands of people play and love these games, but I imagine thousands more would play and be in love with them too if they just had the option to play the way they can. Alright, and then these are just some final things I wanted to say that I didn't know where to put anywhere else. I never thought I'd be making a negative video towards games, but I think this is justified. I'm fortunate enough to be able to play games regardless of what input method is required, but many people aren't as lucky. With that in mind, I do want to end things positively. This isn't sponsored, but I want to shout out the Able Gamers Foundation. I'll post a link below where you can learn about them and donate if you want to help support gamers with disabilities. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.